Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birkin Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birkin. Hey, Megan.
Hey, Jess. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to be here for another round of nonprofit Q&A.
Yes, and today we are joined by Charles McDonald. Hey, Charles.
Hey, what's up, folks? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on the show today. Not only just because I like you and you're an awesome person, but also we work together, which is extra fun to have a client on the show.
Thanks. Yeah, it is actually a lot easier when you get to connect with your lawyer in a human way. You're not a robot. No, it's great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is exciting. I'm super pumped to be here and just a big fan of what y'all do. So thanks.
Right on. Well, I think you're going to bring some interesting perspective as an executive director. Can you just introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do and what you're all about?
I am the executive director, founder and executive director of Community Engagement Partners. So we are a national nonprofit organization that works to build the capacity of leaders and organizations to better partner with the intended beneficiaries of their work. So most of our work takes place in the realm of public education. So we are working with funders and what we call treetops organizations that traditionally have approached their work from a framework we call decide, announce, and defend, which is, I have a brilliant, well-intentioned idea. I'm going to announce it to the world. And then when there's pushback from communities or other folks who may not have been included in those decisions, there's a tendency to get really defensive as opposed to opening yourself up to another realm of possibility. And so what we like to do is shift that and say, hey, can we take an equity-centered approach to how we lead our work, which requires us to do deep listening and learning and be in partnership with folks who have historically not been included in decision-making processes. That's what we do. And I've been doing it for a couple years now. Background is in community organizing and talent work in the education space, strategist, fundraiser, and policy advocate too. So
cool. So I know you're going to have some great answers for our Q&A today.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I am ready. Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Megan, you want to kick us off?
I do. All right. I've got a bit of a doozy of a question to start here. So this question comes from someone sounds like with a new nonprofit. I have a couple students who have been helping me out with my new nonprofit venture, but they want official employment status. I don't have the money to pay them a salary right now, though. So how do I do this as supportively and ethically as possible? I don't want them to feel obligated by any means. Currently, I'm adjusting their work to reflect their future goals and help them with their resumes, find job listings, etc. I figure if I can compensate them with this sort of support, we can make this work for now. Basically, can I hire unpaid W-2 employees without opening the organization to liability?
Whoa.
In a word, no.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question.
Yeah. So just purely from a legal perspective, the problem with this situation is you're going to hire an employee and you're going to be subject to wage and hour law in your state as well as federal employment regulations. So there's an inherent problem that they want official employment status, which, to be fair, I don't know what the employee really is asking for. They may be asking for, I would like to be able to put this on my resume, and that it's not about the dollars of compensation, in which case, give them a title and make them a volunteer.
That's right.
And that's great. But if they actually need to be paid and you don't have any money, what they're asking for is to be in a paid position. There's no ethical way to say, I'm going to make you an employee and not pay you.
Yeah.
What do you think, Charles? I mean, you've got a small organization. I'm sure you've struggled with some of these things. How do you bring people on when you don't necessarily have the budget?
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, to be fair, we don't know all the context here of what the intent of the organization is, mission, vision, right? And then what exactly official employment status means. But just to echo what you said around liability and opening yourself up, yeah, right. And then I think, how do you do this as supportively and ethically as possible? So as a former labor organizer, you pay them, but you're not in a position to do that right now. So, just borrowing Jess's suggestion of creating more structure around volunteers or unpaid internship, that's the recommended route I would go in the immediate term. Now, there are opportunities, perhaps with programs like AmeriCorps or other service-oriented programs that will pay folks like a living stipend and allow them to support organizations that are kind of in a startup mode or don't have a lot of flexible cash. So
That's a creative solution.
Yeah, I would look around and kind of see, where the world of service-oriented organizations exist in your community or at a state level, and get creative that way too. I think the other thing I'll say, and this is the last thing I'll mention, is we work a lot with organizing groups, and so their whole focus is on building and developing leaders. And these are organizations that tend to not have a lot of resources, but what they're doing is they're building, again, the capacity of everyday folks to take on issues to improve the quality of their life. So if your organization is external facing and it's about community uplift, you can think about how you create kind of what we would call like a leadership ladder. And so perhaps you have folks from the community who are helping you stand up this organization, and you're being really intentional about how they're developing as leaders and kind of what the pathway is to kind of grow as a leader to get to that place where they're seen as a real member of your organization with real authority and real roles and responsibilities, but without the official employment status. And that is just something that in the tradition of organizing, that's been around for a very long time. So I hit me up. We can talk. No, I kid. Yeah, that's all I got on that.
Right on. What else you got, Megan?
All right. Our next question is about an executive director working with volunteer board. So the question comes from a member of the board of directors. So it says, we're all volunteers and very busy on the board of directors of a small nonprofit. So we'd like to hire a full-time executive director to run everything during the week. The only problem is none of us really have the time to manage an employee during normal work hours. So we had the idea to do interviews at inconvenient times, like late Friday evenings or early Sunday mornings, so we can weed out anyone who's not willing to be available when we are. Is there something else we can be doing to make sure the final hire will be flexible with a volunteer board?
This is a strange approach.
Right? Would you go to a Friday at 8:30 p.m. interview for an executive director position?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that tells me right away is that this job is not going to be convenient.
Yeah, what are y'all doing? For real. Like not like what are you doing with this process? I have a question about that, but like what do you do?
Well, yeah, and the thing that's really troubling me here is that part in the middle. The only problem is none of us really have the time to manage an employee during normal work hours.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's just some problems here.
Yeah.
The other thing that jumps out to me is they've made it very much about finding someone who will accommodate their own schedules, which kind of jumps out to me as like, you're going to get a certain kind of candidate. You're only going to get somebody who does not have children or, just like a weird approach.
Yeah. I mean, it really comes from and I don't know if this doesn't feel intentional, but it definitely comes off as, you all are aware that you have a lot of power and you're not afraid to wield it. So
Right.
this is real, right? So I think, okay, so the only problem none of us really have, I'm just kind of thinking back on this. The only problem is that none of us really have time to manage an employee during normal work hours. That's real, but that's not your only problem.
Right.
But what I'll say directly to that is, recognizing you're a small nonprofit, I would want to understand as a board, like, what do you think your responsibilities are? Like, what do you see your role as? And like, do you really think it's full-time management of an executive director? Because if you're identifying somebody who is an executive director and you're really clear about what you want from that person, then I would hope that they have like a high executive function. So they're capable of setting a vision, of working independently without a lot of hand holding. They can help manage the board, right? And pull you in at the most appropriate times.
Yeah, I think you're right about there's like a fly in the ointment here, and it's like reading between the tea leaves is what you said, that they have a lot of power and they're not afraid to wield it. And that bit about we need to manage an employee during normal work hours makes it feel like they're going to be micromanaging.
Yeah, not a good look.
It's just like,
Yeah. And look, I think about what, things that you can do to make sure the hire will be flexible with a volunteer board.
Doesn't that come with the territory when you're a small nonprofit executive director? There are dozens and hundreds of boards that have their meetings in the evenings.
Right.
Duh.
Yeah. A prime example, right, from my own experience is that I've got 3 small kids, like really small, but 4, 2, and 4 months. And in my board, members of my board, they all have families. They have children. Some of them are in partnership. Some of them are raising their children by themselves. And it's not unspoken, but we have real talks about like, hey, I might not be able to do 9 to 5 this week, but I could probably do 8:30. And we do some back and forth around when the kids go to sleep. And again, we have conversation about it, but there is something about it that's baked into, and because we're all connected and committed to the vision and the mission, and we'll make it work the best way we can. And so there's something about that's very real, but there's also real to their question, but there's also like some power stuff that they gotta figure out.
Yep.
All right. That was an interesting one. Yeah.
It is.
All right. So our next question here is about accountability. So, is a 501c3 allowed to keep its board of directors secret? It seems really sketchy to me to keep that information hidden from the public. I spoke with one of the board members of the nonprofit I'm talking about, and due to the nature of the org, they are worried about being outed to their employers for being involved with it.
Okay.
Jazz, I feel like there's like a very specific legal answer to this.
Well, yeah, they're not secret because if you're filing a 990 EZ or full form 990 as your annual return to the IRS, your board is listed and it's a public document. Now, it's possible that this organization is teeny tiny and has only been filing a 990N, which is a postcard, and it just doesn't have any information on it, so you wouldn't list your board members. But I think this person just doesn't understand that they actually could probably learn who's on the board by pulling the Form 990 from, Candid or the IRS database. But what's weird is that they would actually talk to a board member, and then that the board members would say that they are not comfortable being more public about their involvement with the organization. And that could be for a variety of reasons, right? It could be that it's, some sort of LGBTQ related organization and some of the people on the board are not out or are, fear retribution from their employer, or some sort of like political affiliation. that they would prefer not to have their employer know about. But the reality is, if you're filing a 990 EZ or more, somebody can find out. Whether you put it on your website or not is a different, question, I guess. What do you do at, your organization, Charles? Do you guys have a board roster on the website or do you not? Because that's kind of a personal choice. And I guess I'm not really sure what all goes into deciding whether or not you sort of like make it very public who's on your board by putting it on the website or not.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm like, ooh, I don't have a really good answer for this one. No, I kid. We do. We don't hide. We have there's nothing to hide about who our board is. We don't have them on our website only because our website is...
It's pretty minimal. I've seen it.
Yeah, you've seen it.
It's very clean.
Yeah.
It's minimal and to the point. Well, I think there's a thing there, though, that it's like, the board we're not here to give people a resume builder, right?
Yeah.
We're on the board to do the work.
That's right.
And there's a certain amount of math that goes into, are we trying to advertise the fancy people on our board, or are we just trying to, do the mission and that's not relevant? And I think that's almost more of like a PR communications marketing choice sometimes.
Right.
Or organizational culture.
I think that's brilliant to think about it that way. And I think to the heart of this kind of question or this situation around being worried for being outed, for being involved with it, if this was one of my board members talking about our organization, I would really want to, I don't know if I want this person on my board. Because I think it's the idea of to your point around, being aligned with the mission and the vision of the work and putting in the work. I just don't know who signs up to be a part of a board that they don't want to be associated with.
Yeah, that you would be ashamed to have people know.
Yeah.
What's going on with that?
Yeah. I think the idea of it being sketchy to keep the board hidden from the public. I mean, if there's a real practical example that we can point to of somebody doing that, then yeah, I'd say that's absolutely sketchy. But if it's not, to my point, not publicly announced on our website, there's still public ways to identify who those board members are. So I think the idea of saying that's sketchy, it's well, I don't know. It depends on the scenario.
I think this person's just paranoid.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. These are great questions. Who is your audience is fascinating.
Well, the internet is fascinating.
Yeah, dig it.
Megan trolls the internet for people asking weird questions and then brings them to us.
Oh, Megan, then you're fascinating. That's actually what's really going on here.
The halls of Reddit, there's a lot to find there. You never know what you're going to run across. But with this particular question, the thing that it made me think of is, I don't know how much either of you are following this, but after the murder of George Floyd, the Minnesota Freedom Fund got just completely clobbered with donations to the point where they were asking people to stop donating to them and to donate to other organizations. And then there was a big outcry from people wondering where all that money was going. It's you got millions of dollars. What are you doing with it?
Yeah. And we're talking a tiny organization that all of a sudden had $30 million.
Yes. Very, very tiny.
And they
were just not able to handle the money coming in and actually do something immediately with it. And then people were angry.
Oh.
And then their board members are on the website, right, Megan?
Yeah. So part of what fueled the fire is their board members were on their website, but the board members were getting harassed at all angles. So they then took the board roster down from the website. And then people are pointing this as a reason that they're being shady about what they're doing and all of this kind of stuff. But on their social media channels, the Minnesota Freedom Fund is just saying, hey, we are trying to, communicate through our official channels, not through our individual board members and things of that nature. So it became sort of a decision to protect their board members from, internet harassment,
Yeah.
to take them down. But they were originally on that website. So.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, the world comes at you fast. And as a fascinating example, some of this is interesting. It's bringing up these kind of thoughts I have around the importance of being aligned with your board around. I mean, like, I don't know if anybody can ever prepare for something like the extrajudicial murder of a unarmed Black man, and then like folks flooding your nonprofit with $30 million. Right? I mean, like that's
right.
like
it's
what?
Not like in your communication strategy pre-planning package that you might have prepared. Like,
no, it's not. But there's something really interesting about, like, these are people, right? Like I think about my board members are my friends. They are like they have real lives. They have people they take care of. Like, right? It's like, if any of that is in jeopardy of being threatened or they're made to feel unsafe for any reason, my goodness, I would have some level of crisis too, right? And
yeah.
so I think it's just interesting. It brings up like these interesting thoughts about how important it is to have conversation with the folks who are connected to our work, in particular if our nonprofit work can be viewed as controversial, right? If we're really about challenging status quo or shifting power dynamics, like, then yeah, these things are very real things that we need to have to look.
Yeah, and that may be the case for this organization. They may be doing something that is seen as potentially dangerous as far as challenging people in power and those sorts of things, right? So it's possible that that's their choice to keep a lower profile because the work is important, but they don't want their kids to get death threats in the mail or something.
Yeah. Wow. This, like, we went to every dimension of this one. Like,
we did.
I like it. Yeah. Okay, Megan, you know what? You're great at getting these questions.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Awesome. It's always fun to look, for sure. All right. So we've got another one. This one is about converting a nonprofit. So it says our 501c3 status was automatically revoked by the IRS. The process of getting my tax exemption back seems really time consuming and expensive, but I'd like to continue with my work. Can I just start running the organization as a for-profit?
Well, okay, so there's some things to unpack here. Now, first, potentially, this organization could be converted to a taxable entity, and depending on your state situations and all of that, it is possible. But I'm going back to the beginning of the question where their status was automatically revoked by the IRS. Right. And the reason that happens is when we don't file our 990 for 3 years in a row. After the third year of non-filing, the IRS will take your tax exempt status and throw it in the garbage. Says you have not been communicating with us, so you don't get tax exemption anymore. Now, that tells me that there's no internal structure or like financial controls, or like there's something wrong in the back office of this nonprofit because they're not even paying attention to the fact that they have to file an annual return with the IRS. So either they're very, very small and, just haven't been doing much, or they've been doing a lot of things and sort of like being like, la, 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 it's a nonprofit. I don't have to do any actual work. Like there's no compliance. It's just holding hands and singing Kumbaya and collecting donations. There can be a lack of professionalism in newer, smaller nonprofits. They don't really recognize what all of their complicated requirements are. So that could also be the case. The fact that the process of getting their tax exemption back seems time consuming and expensive. Well, yeah, but if you had been doing the time consuming and expensive parts of hiring a CPA and getting your 990s done, you wouldn't have been in this boat. So although it could be, a quagmire to try and dissolve or reform, we could spend all day on how that might work. I think at base, if this organization is, this not really having their stuff together as far as being able to comply with all of the IRS regulations and state regulations, then they probably shouldn't be running a nonprofit, and they should probably talk to someone and find a way to do the work as a taxable entity. Because, I say this all the time, every good idea and every good deed does not need to be a nonprofit. You can be a business that also does good things.
I mean, I don't have much to add other than, we have our nonprofit status and we file our 990s. We have a C3 status, and I also have an LLC, because there are, I think to Jess's last point there, like, there's a real mission and vision that we have for our C3, which is very much focused on education and educational equity. However, the discipline of community engagement, and organizing, and advocacy, and the world of equity design, is not limited to education. And so established an LLC so that if there are partners that we have, or folks who are interested in our work who are outside the scope of what our nonprofit serves, then we can explore taking on some of those projects. And so, yeah, I think, there's ways to get creative. I absolutely agree that it doesn't have to necessarily be in the nonprofit space to do good. But I absolutely also believe that you gotta get your paperwork in order. So
yeah. Running a nonprofit is no joke, as you are aware. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen. And sometimes I wish people would take my online course about whether you should start a nonprofit or not, because they get up to their eyeballs and then realize I hate everything about this. And why they're hating it is because nonprofit land is complicated. And it's much easier to run your lemonade stand as a taxable entity than it is to deal with a board and all of the IRS regs. So I think this person just kind of put the cart before the horse here, but they're figuring it out now.
Yeah.
What else you got for us, Megan?
All right, I have one last question. All right, so the question is, I have an idea for a nonprofit that's been steeping in my mind for years now. I'm ready to start planning, but I'm terrified that I won't be able to be successful. I don't really know anything about nonprofits, and I don't know anyone who has done something like this before. The only thing I have is the possibility for someone to invest in my startup costs. I guess what I'm asking, is it normal to start from nothing? I'm in my early 20s, I'm a mom, and this is my passion project. I just need someone to tell me whether or not I'm making a mistake.
Well, this person clearly should take the Founders Roadmap online course. In just 5 short lessons, I will teach you whether you should start a nonprofit or not. This episode brought to you by Founders Roadmap.
But seriously, though, you should take the course. Yeah.
Yeah, for real. Go to my website. You can find it. The part where she's like, I don't know anything about nonprofits.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, maybe you should fix that.
Yeah.
Maybe you should do a little research. The only thing I have is the possibility for someone else to invest in my startup costs. Okay, that's like a thing where people think, but if I'm a nonprofit, then people will donate to the cause and I won't have to pay for my business costs. That's my cynical view on this question.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, it is normal to start from nothing in every context, including starting your own business, including starting a nonprofit. Everyone starts at zero, and you have to put in the blood, sweat, and tears, the elbow grease, investing your own money. Most founders that we work with, they are funding the costs to start the nonprofit at first, because other people don't just magically come along and pay for things because you want to start a nonprofit.
So my experience with this is a little a little different. I kind of stumbled I stumbled into my nonprofit in a way that I just felt very like super fortunate. I didn't ever see myself as leading an organization. I'm not even trying to be humble right now, like for real. It just was not something that I'd ever like seriously entertained. I had some folks around me who were super supportive. There was an opportunity to kind of play around with the idea of community engagement partners. So to get more specific, there's something that I wouldn't say a lot, but many people that I know in the nonprofit space, how they approach kind of getting their idea from concept to reality with a level of support. So I was fortunate at the time of like ideating around community engagement partners that we had a fiscal sponsor. And so what that meant was that we were essentially an initiative of an established organization. We got the benefit of being able to use all of their operational infrastructure, their existing kind of board and whatever resources, if you will, that came along with that particular entity, which allowed us the freedom to really build out the concept without having to do a ton around like kind of building the infrastructure at the same time as like the proof of concept for like the real on the ground work. And so in that way, we were incredibly fortunate, and it gave us a little bit of a runway to determine whether or not this thing could really have legs and stand on its own as its own nonprofit C3. And, luckily enough, we were able to kind of to make that vision a reality. But without that type of infrastructure support, I mean, it would have been really tough. So I think not just to directly answer this question, but anybody out there that's listening that has what you think is like a really powerful idea, you may want to consider, but you're not really sure where to start. First of all, start building relationships across your local ecosystem or national ecosystem with organizations that you admire, that you think are doing really good work, that have a track record of success. Folks are going to, I don't know, if somebody reached out to me to ask me questions, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to answer that call because we want to see more people doing good in the world. That's first. Secondly is if you're past that point and you feel very confident that you want to explore this idea, maybe you don't necessarily have the capital, or you don't even have access to get the capital. You may want to explore, can you pitch your idea to an existing organization and say, hey, look, it could be an opportunity for you all to partner with somebody and make an investment in a leader who has a real passion about the work. And if the idea is viable, then perhaps you could become an initiative of an existing organization that has resources. They can provide you that shelter for the time being to get your idea off the ground, maybe even help with making introductions to funders or individual donors who may be interested in making an investment in that idea. And who knows? I think we need to see more organizations doing that anyway. And then the last thing I'll say, I promise, is that some of the best ideas don't necessarily need to be nonprofits to get folks to invest in your work or in that vision. And so I'd say just consider that too. And I'm not even talking about a different like taxable structure. I'm just saying like legit, like maybe it doesn't actually need to be an organization.
Yeah, like you can just do the good thing on your own. I love everything you just said there, because if you can't get other people excited about your mission through building those relationships, if no existing organization thinks that that's an initiative that they would want to back, those are things that will tell you this may not work, right? Yeah. And there are a lot of times where individual people want to do a thing, and you're 100% correct. It does not need to come in the package of a nonprofit corporation that has more in common with a Fortune 500 company than it does with a lemonade stand. So
that's right.
a lot of times you could just do the thing and not worry about it. A lot of people just think that money will rain from the sky because they start a nonprofit, and that's just not how it works. So I love your strategy of like reaching out to other people in the same or similar space and finding other organizations that would host you, because that's really what you need to build something strong anyway. And so if you can't do that, then you probably need to critically reassess whether what you're doing, works. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just say one more thing, Jess, before we wrap this up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this a little bit as a founder of color. There are things that I think about in the early stages of starting this organization that were real challenges that had nothing to do with the viability of the idea or my level of experience or expertise in the field, but were very much connected to not having the relationships and the networks and that access to capital. And for many BIPOC founders of color in the social impact space, this is the number one barrier to longevity, sustainability, and really, success ultimately. And so it's a reality that we just have to confront. It's not an excuse per se, and I'm not using it as one, but we have to be strategic and have our eyes wide open to understanding like what are the systemic and structural barriers that exist. The reality that we live in a hyper segregated society, most of our networks based on who we are, like our racial identities, so to speak, are pretty similar, right? So identifying those folks in the nonprofit space who are deeply committed to racial equity, social justice, breaking down barriers to access. If you're out there and you're an underrepresented founder, like do that, build those relationships, and be very, very clear about the importance of establishing networks with folks who have access to capital and want to make investments in social impact work, and be really clear about, your worth too, because we are also getting less of the money in terms of gifts that are given than white founders in the same space. So these are just things we got to just confront and look at and be really clear-eyed about if indeed we're, you got a brilliant idea in that level of expertise. So
yes, you're potentially swimming upstream in the nonprofit industrial complex for sure.
Yeah, that's my TED Talk. Thank you.
Well, Charles, it has been an absolute delight to have you here with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you all, Megan, Jess. Like, you do fantastic work. Really about what we would say where I'm from is you're about that life, and I just love it because you create space for folks like me and many others who are just on our grind to do this and do what we love and make a huge impact in our community. So just know that you're appreciated and the work is super important. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, Megan, on to searching for the next questions for the next Q&A episode, right?
Yep, heading back to Reddit.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birkin. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkinlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birkin Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.